Good morning. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy here at the smartmoneyculture.tv. We're going to continue our topic from yesterday and hopefully spend some more time on it, really going over your rights and dealing with the IRS, and also talking about some of the things to look for. So um, be wary of people selling snake oil, of people not giving you good information. I have a horror story I ran into yesterday that I want to share because it is so important out there that you can trust your tax professionals, but always trust but verify. Verify it's being done right. So again, if you do have questions, we're going to talk about how to check people out before you hire them. Make sure they're not going to cause you a lot of problems. So again, stay tuned with us. We've got a lot of great stuff to cover, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. So we're just going to kind of dive right into these. Some of these are articles that we've already touched on. And again, we mentioned the other day, this is a little tongue-in-cheek. It's the day before the holidays, so we're going to have a little fun with some things today before we get too serious. So this article, it's an opinion piece, an opinion piece from townhall.com about save the cows. And while it sounds funny, it's because laws are being passed mainly in Denmark. And this is something that liberals have complained about for quite some time, that livestock creates and raising animals creates a lot of methane. So humans create carbon dioxide, plants recycle it and create oxygen. But again, it's just a big complaint here. So in Denmark, they're taxing cows $100 per cow, roughly. So I think it comes out to around $96 a cow tax. And they're saying, look, it's going to come across the pond, and it'll be proposed here in the United States. The question is, would it ever get through here and through Congress to tax livestock to fund green energy projects? So what really happens when you tax livestock and animals, you're going to make, protein, animal protein more expensive, which again, that cost gets passed on to the consumer and just further adds to inflationary pressures on food. So they're saying, well, what's next? Of course, why cows and not pigs and goats? Why not chickens and other livestock? So it's just a matter of time before it gets applied to other things. They tried it out with cows. The farmers threw a complete fit about it, but again, the government didn't care. So PBS is claiming that cows and other livestock are responsible for 40% of methane emissions, which is a potent greenhouse gas. So again, he says, well, off with the heads of the cows. He's a little tongue-in-cheek here in the article. And his prediction is that within the next 18 months, this will be proposed in Congress. It probably won't go anywhere. But again, just what happens over in Europe usually doesn't stay over in Europe. And you have quite a few countries over there that are very high on the economic freedom index in some ways, in other ways not. So I mean, again, each country has things they're really good at, other things they're not so good at. But and one of his points is the species responsible for almost all of the carbon emissions is human beings. What are we going to do? Just get rid of human beings? Well, that's part of birth control. That's part of abortions. That's part of population management, which is already a real thing in many countries, but it causes its own problems and social distortions, and it really wreaks havoc on safety net programs like Social Security and Medicare, Medi-Cal, or Medicare, and for those reasons that we're seeing so many problems with our programs to help people. So again, Getting a little more serious, this is actually good news. Next one, this is from the Epic Times. Biden administration invests $504 million in 12 tech hubs. So the problem being, most of this is focused on Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, and California is where most of the tech centers in the country are focused. That is changing. A lot of that is moving to Texas. People are leaving Silicon Valley because it's just the cost of living is insane. But they're saying, again, over the last 20 years, it's mainly been in California, New York, and Massachusetts. And so part of these, they're putting grants out of $501 million each, or $51 million grants to 12 regional tech hubs. So this is for semiconductors, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and clean energy. So one of the things they are noticing is that a lot of people that don't want to live in California, don't want to move there, they can either try to work remotely, and that's been going back and forth, or by creating tech hubs outside of California. Hopefully we're grabbing our best and brightest that can live throughout the country and not just be forced to go to either New York or California or Boston. So some of the areas receiving these programs, look to be fairly balanced: Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, New York, New Mexico, New York, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Wisconsin. So, it looks like it's pretty well spread out. And again, as long as the money's used well, instead of the government just throwing money at issues, this could be a good thing. And when you talk about government spending, $500,000 is not, well, $500 million isn't a huge amount. But again, the question is this actually going to work, or are we just throwing money at a perceived problem here? So they plan to ask for more money, more funding to help grow more tech hubs across the country. And then they've authorized $10 billion for the program for over 5 years, and this is just the first round. And then part of the problem is, while this sounds good, it looks good, is this money we really have? I think it's a decent move by the Biden administration, and hopefully it helps. And I'm not even sharing that article. I must have accidentally closed out the previous article. So just this from the Epic Times talking about the Biden administration investing $504 million nationwide. So going to the next article, this is not as friendly article. Right before the 4th of July, tomorrow, the Biden administration is selling 1 million barrels from our national reserves. So again, why are they doing this? For cheap political points. This is not the point of the strategic oil reserve, but overall it's still very, very low compared to where it was. Or again, it was started back in the 70s. And why are they selling it? To help gas prices. It's not for any strategic planning. It's not to help overall in the case of an emergency. An emergency is not inflation caused by a government overspending. That's not an emergency. That's called poor planning, and you're using cheap tricks to try to fight an issue that you created. So again, instead of increasing the production of oil supply, which would really lower the price of gas, they do these short-term releases, which are timed to make people feel better. But again, it's not really, in the long term, it's just a short-term gimmick. As soon as they stop releasing more oil, prices are going to go right back up. So they're claiming that prices have come down only 20 cents in the last 2 months. Well, that's great. They're still up $1.50, $2 from 2020, 2021. So again, it kind of disingenuous. We reduced the price 20 cents, but over the administration, we've increased it by 50, 75%. So again, its average price is around $3.49 a gallon right now. But again, U.S. crude topped $83 a barrel. Overall, intermediate crude benchmark is up 17%. So while this is a short-term help, they're definitely expecting as we go into July that gas prices are just going to go up. So how bad is it that they tap into these reserves and release money every now and then? So 2020 and 2012, President Obama created some more reserves, expanded the reserves for the federal government in the case of emergency. And so our total reserves right now are at 233 million barrels. Sounds like a lot, but it's still down 3% from a year ago. Again, when Ukraine was invaded, they released 180 million barrels of oil, which again really had a huge impact. They're saying, well, we successfully lowered prices about 80 cents, but at what cost? So if you go down to the oil bottom of this, we consume about 20 million barrels of oil. If we had a severe emergency and had to rely on it, it would last us 18 days as a country. So that's the problem. This is why it was really taking it down by 180 plus million barrels of oil. It's really hurt it, but they are slowly trying to put it back in place. So again, some of the details here. It's about 40% lower still than January 2021. They've been gradually filling the barrels, and it got back up to 372. And now, every now and then, we just decide to release them for holidays, whatever. This is not traditionally how this has been used by any administration prior to the Biden administration. So again, kudos on the tech thing. What are you doing here on oil? It's not good for the health of the country, and again sets a bad precedent that other presidents will just manipulate prices and willy-nilly decide to release gases just to make their presidency look better, rather than establishing good policy moving forward, energy policy that will help establish some certainty in the market, and that's what really hurts. So we're going to move on after the break and talk about a big issue that just came up yesterday, and then we're going to talking about tax pros and watching out for people, bad actors in the tax industry. Welcome back, everybody. So, this is an interesting article. The IRS has been warning about this that identity thieves and other scammers are targeting tax pros. So, um, making sure that your information is confidential should be one of the key priorities of tax professionals. And again, this is protect yourself. Make sure that you're working with legitimate tax professionals that do have security in place. So again, not only are they again, this is a new line of attack for identity thieves to go after tax professionals because they do maintain a lot of personal information and confidential information for many clients. So part of this is just trying to raise awareness. Again, they go to 5 different cities, but some of these are just some basic plans for businesses. And if you have any kind of confidential information, you should be applying some of these. So create a security plan. Be aware of new emerging scams targeting tax pros, phishing, spear phishing, whaling. So be very aware. Make sure if you're a tax professional that your staff is aware of these different attempts. And one of the things here is it's a good idea to encourage people to do PINs. We do. We encourage people to do that all the time. Do the IRS online account. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of what the IRS is doing, but I think these online accounts are good things. The only problem is you have to do a face scan. Give them all kinds of personal information. It makes it a lot harder. If you're concerned about government knowing way too much about you, it's not the way to go. But it can absolutely help you. And be aware of the telltale signs of identity theft. If you're getting multiple returns filed for the same clients, if you see someone playing with the cursors on your mouse, e-file acknowledgments for tax returns more than you filed. It's again, and then having antivirus software, firewall, multi-factor authentication, drive encryption, and a VPN, all helpful for preventing ID theft. Now, I do want to spend a little extra time talking about, and it's something that came up yesterday. And someone called in. They were getting audited for 3 years by the IRS. This is a trust issue. So he had multiple issues going on, and it all stemmed from hiring the wrong tax company. So he went to someone that looked like they were legitimate. It was a large firm that pretty much they did the tax preparation, tax representation, all in-house, as well as other services. They looked like a full service firm where they did everything. The problem with many of these places is that they don't communicate very well within in-house, and often they're not that good at doing everything. So again, that's why we specialize. Is we're great at what we do, but we don't try to do everything. His big mistake is he didn't Google the company beforehand. He didn't check out their reviews. He didn't make sure they were a legitimate company beforehand. We encourage people all the time, check out our online reviews, Google us, see what pops up, check out our website, see what other people are saying about us. Check out my bio and what we've done. And lo and behold, he didn't find out that they had been sued by the IRS and lost. So part of the problem is that they were pushing these ideas out there now. Whether it's right or wrong, I don't have any opinion about whether or not taxes are constitutional or not. What I do know is that the Supreme Court has held repeatedly that they are constitutional. So that's the law. That's how the law works. So if you want to change it, you have to vote. But I don't think either party is serious about holding that income taxes are unconstitutional. So, pardon me. What happened is that this CPA And this firm apparently were not paying taxes. They were not setting up things correctly. They were setting things up to avoid paying taxes. And of course, when he got in trouble, he tried to work directly with the IRS. He wanted to see what was the issue. Okay, if there's some mistakes, let's get these straightened up. Let's pay the taxes and move on. Doesn't want to fight the IRS. Doesn't want a massive headache. And honestly, there's plenty of times that it doesn't make sense to do so. The CPA violated his fiduciary rights. Yet he has obligation and duties to his client by not agreeing to us, not informing him what he was doing, and not doing what the client wanted. If you have someone that's pushing something that you really don't want as a taxpayer, get a second opinion. I tell people all the time, look, I will give you your options. I will lay them out for you, but you decide. And sometimes it's, the opposite of what I might want. I, spoke to someone yesterday, went through all their options, and their best option was not to hire me. So I told them, don't. You need an estate attorney, you need this, and we got to refer it out, connected to great people. But if you have someone that's pushing you, hey, you need to do this, and you're not comfortable with it, don't do it. You have to be comfortable with how you're presenting, with what options you're going to pursue. I've had people that qualified for an offer in compromise, and they didn't want to do it. They just wanted to pay their taxes and set up an installment agreement. So we guided them in that direction, and that's what they wanted to do. That's what they were comfortable with. And you have to feel good and at peace with whatever program you pursue. And so that's a personal choice. If someone's not listening to you, or they're pushing something that you don't understand, or they're not informing you of what you're doing, those are huge red flags. So when this was happening, he went and he talked to a different CPA, and the CPA said, no, you don't want to go down that road. And what happened is that the CPA had an attorney file a motion to sue the IRS on his case, and he's like, no, I don't want to go there. That's not what I'm looking to do. And true story, there are plenty of tax professionals, attorneys included, especially attorneys that will do the wrong thing for clients. They'll do what's in their best interest, or they won't be frank and honest and upfront with the client. So we had someone whose case had gone all the way to the DOJ, Department of Justice. Not good. If they would have kept it with the IRS, they could have amended their returns or did an audit reconsideration, something to lower their balances. They were pegged at $500,000 by the IRS. They could have lowered them down substantially and worked within the IRS to get an excellent resolution. So I've got this duck or something making a noise outside. The main thing is to know what's happening here and know that when you are working with the IRS, that you should have representation that's working in your best interest. So check out who you're representing, check out or who you're hiring, making sure they're acting in your best interest before moving forward with them. And so again, seeing too many people burned by this, where they listen to horrible advice and they don't get a second opinion. They don't make sure that their representatives are doing what's in their best interests. I've seen that happen too many times. So moving on to the next article, we've got a couple more articles that we want to touch on before we hit our main topic here. I'm going to try to go through these fairly quickly. And this is a CNN article, pretty interesting article, saying a global tax war is looming. That sounds horrible. So, and it's saying it could hit big tech hard. What could also hit big tech hard is if they are, they're saying a stalemate in Washington could destroy a landmark tax deal. This is a tax deal that's so bad, Biden hasn't even introduced it to the Senate. They've technically agreed to it, but there's no way it would pass the U.S. Senate, so they're not going to make All the Democrat senators go on record either for or against it. And this is part of the global tax deal that Brazil and others have been pushing. And now we have CNN pushing the same thing. So $240 billion in additional taxes across the world on top corporations. Who gets hit with this the hardest? American companies, American billionaires. So this is the rest of the world taxing American billionaires. And so their complaint is if they don't get a global tax deal in place, other countries are going to either start taxing, and then people will go to low tax countries. So they will try to avoid these taxes by going to other low tax countries, which is already happening, has always happened. So they're trying to claim this guy is falling, but it's just because they're not going to get their global income tax or wealth tax passed through. The next article goes right along with this, and no, it's not wrestling. The NHL free agency shows that teams in states with no income tax have an advantage. Just like with the global tax, if they have high taxes, people are going to flee. So it's an interesting article. It goes through, and this happens with all kinds of sports professionals. People make a lot more money, and this is the Florida Panthers that just won another Stanley Cup. And they've won, I believe, 4 out of the last 5 years. I'm not a hockey fan. I didn't grow up with it, and so I'm not the most familiar with the game. I'm more of a baseball, basketball, football guy. But they go through this, that teams, there's a distinct advantage for teams in states with no tax, always. And so, again, it's really helped them win 4 of the past 5 Stanley Cup championships. They can continue to draw free agents because they can pay them less money than other teams, and they still get more money in their pocket because Florida being no tax. So again, this is an advantage. It's just part of reality. And here's the San Jose Sharks general manager Mike Greer said, part of reality. It is an advantage for those teams. They can obviously pay the guys a little bit less, and guys are happy to go there. So, it's not their fault. It's just the way it is. So just like it's happening in the NHL, it happens on a larger scale globally that, just because you have, you're going to have differences in taxation. You're going to have some states that are more tax-free, and I strongly disagree with CNN that we need a global tax that would really hit American manufacturers more than anybody else. And same thing if they wanted to, you have the federal income tax, but state income tax is very different across the board. So we're going to jump to back to where we were yesterday. We had talked about the right to be informed, the right to quality service, the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax, and then the right to challenge the IRS's position and be heard. So this is where we are right now. You can challenge the IRS's position. We're going to talk a lot about how, and I know we touched on this yesterday. So, number one way, ask for a supervisor, ask for a manager. I did it yesterday. Did I get a manager call? No, the guy claimed, well, I am the team lead. I said, look, there's always somebody else. And she said, oh, well, there's nobody else. I said, you don't know what you're doing. And she didn't. It was a pretty ridiculous call. I ended up hanging up, calling back, and getting a much better representative and getting the case taken care of for my client. But you can always ask for a manager. You can always make a CDP appeal. You can do a CAP appeal. There are ways to appeal this. And if you're dealing with the revenue officer, you can ask for a manager, a regional manager, and then you can always, go to appeals and try to fight in appeals as well. And depending on what you're dealing with, you need to know how to appeal decisions. And if you really think you're getting the short end, you can always go to tax court. Don't rush to tax court. A lot of professionals will file a petition just to kind of keep that option open in case they want to do it later. But more often than not, I see people going to tax court and just getting hurt, and hurt badly. I have many stories of people that ended up going to tax court and then to district court with the Department of Justice, where they weren't willing to negotiate. They just wanted to fight, 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 and it hurt. Ended up hurting them more than anything else. So, right to appeal an IRS decision to an independent forum. So this is you are entitled to fair and impartial administrative appeal. So this is where I was mentioning with the appeals process. And there's a few different ways to go about this. Taxpayer advocate is a very good source to appeal and have someone take a second look at what the IRS is doing. If it's not correct, they can take it to the person. So taxpayer advocate is very useful when the IRS should be making an adjustment. They should be helping you with your case, but you can't get a hold of the right person. You submit paperwork, it takes forever, it gets lost. So the taxpayer advocate is within the overall IRS umbrella, but they operate independently from collections, and their whole purpose is to help track what's going on. A lot of times they can't make decisions, they can't make changes, but they can follow up and be a bug in the ear of whoever can make those decisions, and they can help get a lot done for you and for taxpayers. So they're overwhelmed right now, but when you finally get someone involved, assigned to your case, you have to stay on top of them, and it's a process. But I've had taxpayer advocate really help out as far as having an outside agency, an agency that's still part of the IRS, but technically outside of the IRS process, really help resolve decisions. You can always set up appointments and go and talk to someone in person. That can be very helpful as well. You can always appeal things further into the IRS. Now, when you do an appeal, and I do this frequently, and if you don't hear back for months and months and months, don't give up. Average response time can be 18 months to 2 years. That's how bad the customer service is at the IRS. They're overwhelmed, frankly. But instead of putting more people to actually help customers and clear out their backlog, they're focusing more and more on aggressive collections, going after the dollars rather than helping taxpayers with legitimate issues. So what I frequently do is that when I do file for an administrative appeal, I will also file and create a case with taxpayer advocate. Because I know they're going to take forever. I know it's very easy for them to just lose a case. Oh, we closed that out. We didn't get a response, but we never sent anything. The bureaucracy is horrible, but if you can get someone in taxpayer advocate to follow up on a case, then they're much more likely to actually do it and to make sure it gets done right. And then you have to follow up not only with the IRS, but also with taxpayer advocate. But as long as you just, again, you've got to be the bulldog, you've got to call and follow up. Sometimes it's every month, but you need to stay on top of them until it's wiped out. Right to finality. This is an important thing that most people don't talk about. So again, we have collection statute expiration dates, and that's when tax debts expire. And taxpayers have the right to know the maximum amount of time they have to challenge the IRS position, maximum amount of time the IRS had to audit a particular tax year or collect a tax debt. Now, we're going to have to talk about this after the break because I only have like 10 minutes. And also they have the right to know when the IRS is finished an audit. So when the IRS does something, they can't sit there and come back time and time again and hammer you. And we're going to be right back after this break. Welcome back, everybody. So, just finishing up on these key rights that you have, and the right to finality is more important than people understand. So, it is important that you know how to that you have good information about your tax case. If the IRS has finished an audit or the time period for the audit has passed up, that you can know that it's a fixed amount and it's not going to change. And give you peace of mind. The whole idea is that it's not fair for the IRS to go back 6, 10 years and then require that you pull up information from that far back. The IRS only keeps information on file for 10 years. The states, however, will go further back. Now, so this is the maximum amount of time the IRS has to, so you should know how long you have to challenge the IRS position, maximum amount of time the IRS has to audit, but also to collect on a tax debt. And this is something that the IRS has decreased their transparency on. So they've absolutely made it harder to know when a tax debt expires. Again, this is another ding on the Biden administration for making these changes just in the last 3 years. So what they used to do is you would call in and you would have the expiration dates, and you can rely on those as long as nothing else happened to extend out the tax debt. You can rely on those. They have now since changed it where you can't rely on those dates anymore because they will review it. So they don't have updated tax dates for you when you call in, but you can get an idea of when it's supposed to expire, but they will review it and try to extend it out so long, and sometimes they do it incorrectly. I've seen their numbers be extended out to ridiculous, 10 years or more, where the IRS is trying to collect for 20 years. Sometimes it's just really bad moves on the taxpayer part where they didn't understand that. So when you're talking to a tax professional, if they don't understand how long the IRS has to collect the tax debt, and if you're filing really old returns, you can extend that out. For example, if you file a 2010 return right now, it's 14 years old. IRS can only go back 6 years, but if you file that today, the IRS will have another 10 years to collect on that. Don't do that to yourself. Get some good advice first. Make sure that who you're talking to understands how to strategically help you while meeting all the legal requirements of the IRS. So again, that's if someone tells you you need to file 10 years of returns, if it's for the federal government, it's only going to hurt you. Get a second opinion. The most they can ask for is 6 years. And if you need to file older years, you should be replacing balances in years that they filed for you. That's the only reason to file older than 6 years. So again, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us, 520-485-7371. Look these up. So we shared an article the other day how the IRS apologized to a billionaire. And also there were hundreds, if not thousands, of other top individuals who had their income taxes blasted out there and exposed. Former President Trump was one of them. There's no apology to him. That is a huge violation of your rights. Everything that you share with the IRS should be confidential. So any inquiry, examination, or enforcement action will comply with the law, be no more intrusive than necessary. So if they're demanding information that is too intrusive, and the IRS has gotten a lot worse about this, but again, you have due process rights. So the 14th Amendment applies to everything they're doing about this. You have the right to contest any collection actions. You have the right to know exactly what's going on and how to appeal these actions. The problem is most of the time when people are contesting them, the IRS has processes in place to make sure that as they go through this, that all this information, so they are pretty good about dotting their I's and crossing their T's. Doesn't mean that they make mistakes, but the best way to stop search and seizure is to, you have to work with them. You have to do the basics, file your taxes, make sure you're not going to owe moving forward, and then you can work on your past due taxes. But a lot of people complain and they go in and they fight like crazy, and it could be something that's unjust. And they're going to lose, and they lose all the time because they don't have someone giving them good advice on how to deal with the IRS. So, number one thing is you have to become compliant with your filing requirements and your ongoing payment compliance, which means current year, get square with the current year first and foremost. And even then, like right now, we're in July. We just started July. It's more important to pay July moving forward than try to get caught up for all of 2024. Again, that's the best way to move forward and to make sure that you can then go in and contest, search, seizure, bank levies, wage garnishments, all kinds of actions that the IRS can contain or can take. Again, they can be very, very nasty if you're not compliant, you're not working with them. Right to confidentiality. So again, this goes back to that the disclosure, massive disclosure. So you have the right to expect that any information you provide to the IRS or that the IRS has will not be disclosed unless authorized by you, the taxpayer, or by law. So again, when the tax liens are public records, so when the IRS files tax lien, it does go out in the public. It does not, since 2017, it doesn't hurt your credit anymore. It doesn't show on your credit reports, but it does become public knowledge that there is a tax lien. Your personal information, though, and what's on your tax returns is confidential. So that's why the IRS had to pay a huge settlement and issue a formal apology for the contractor that was, again, safeguards were not followed, put into place by the IRS, and allowed him to disclose the information of thousands of taxpayers. It's a huge violation of their rights. So when you're talking to the IRS, anything you say should be kept confidential. It will go and can be noted in your tax record, but the IRS should not be disclosing to anybody outside the IRS your information. And that's one of the reasons where to establish confidentiality, sometimes it can be very hard to even talk to them because you have to have the right address, you have to have your date of birth, you have to have a lot of personal information just to access your tax account. Now, the IRS has stepped that up and made it harder to talk to them. Some ways it makes sense, but sometimes it just gets stupid where they won't even talk to the taxpayer, which is not correct. This is a big one that the IRS violates on a regular basis. The right to retain representation. Does everybody need representation? No. And I'll be the first to admit it. But you have this right to retain authorized representation to be represented before the IRS by a tax expert. It's of your choice to represent them in their dealings with the IRS. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, and I have actually listened to people in the IRS tell my clients, look, you didn't need to hire them. People can do, I'm a reasonable guy. You can just work directly with me. Right. You're from the largest collection in the world, and I should just trust the IRS. There are times that, and individuals that you can, but again, they're not there for your interests. They're there to do a job, and that job is to collect money for the IRS. So, again, there are rare circumstances where you get someone that's very nice, but again, you're not going to get the best representation from the IRS, and they're not going to even represent you long term. So if you have a revenue officer, they'll do what they need to resolve the case right then and there before, but they're not going to set you up for long-term success. They're not going to do abatements for you. They're not going to follow up on all of that and make sure it's done correctly because that's not their job. They're not set up to help you through the entire process when we're dealing with multiple departments of the IRS. So Again, anytime someone says, oh, you don't need to hire an attorney, they are violating your rights. Anytime they say you don't need a representative, I would just, so hold on, this is in the Taxpayer Bill of Rights and you're telling me not to? Isn't that a violation of my rights? Get their name, get their ID number, and you can report them through TIGTA. So that's TIGTA. You can file a TIGTA report on any IRS employee and I believe other government employees as well, but especially the IRS, and then it will be investigated. It is a black mark on their professional career and record to have TIGTA reports filed against them, especially if they're in the wrong. So again, as nasty as the IRS is getting, and sometimes people call us and I say, look, this is all you need to do. This is pretty easy. Again, if people want us to do it, yeah, we'll handle it for them. But I have had people call that seem like they've already set up an installment agreement. They've already done this. So I said, okay, this is what needs to be done. Is this something you feel comfortable doing yourself, or do you want a tax professional to do it for you? And sometimes I get both answers. Sometimes they want to hire us and have us do it. I'm like, okay, we could easily do this and make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. The more complex it is, the more I'm going to tell them, look, you should have us do it, but I'll give them their options. Talking about more complex, one of the things that has become more complex than ever, or more difficult to do than ever, is an offer and compromise. And again, the customer service is just, it's horrible with the IRS, and especially with the offer and compromise unit. They've made it as hard as possible to get offers through, even though people deserve them, they qualify for them. So this last one dovetails right into this. You have a right to a fair and just tax system. To get your questions answered, if you're being taxed unfairly, or there's a problem there, to have it addressed or questioned. And so if someone makes a minor mistake, you should be able to go to the IRS and have that fixed. Now, if you take out money out of a 401k and they didn't roll it over, they lost the check. They said, look, I'm disorganized. The check's probably still in my house somewhere. And they got penalized for taking a big distribution. Their tax balance went up. They would have done it right and used somebody instead of doing it themselves when they took the money out and just rolled it over into another investment account or a Roth or something like that. They would have been just fine. But because they didn't within the time period, and if you really blow that time period, there's no helping you. I'm sorry. We then help you. You can't fix that issue, but we can go and deal with the taxes. But again, having a fair and just tax system is something that should matter. There's times it doesn't, depending on where you are. And I've had case law where I've had cases where if they're in other districts and areas of the United States, that they would have been just fine. But in one case where New York, federal district in New York, held that if you don't have proof dispositive that something had been mailed in, they would not accept any other kind of proof. And so it's the courts as well sometimes deciding not to have a fair and just tax system, or to make things harder than taxpayers and put the finger on the scales for the IRS. So this, I think more than ever though, the Supreme Court just came out with a decision, and it's a controversial decision, where they're not going to give the federal government such deference as they used to give. And that's called Chevron deference. And the court just knocked that out, saying, look, courts are the ones that should be weighing this, not unelected bureaucrats. And I think a lot of things that have been held in the IRS's favor are going to be revisited, and it's overdue. Because part of the reason that Chevron was knocked out is because the IRS and this government has been very aggressive and pushing novel theories, taking statutes and interpreting them and twisting them to something completely different. And Congress has not acted. Time and time again, Congress has not acted. And a lot of that's by design. But again, to have a functioning government, we need to make sure that the different parts of the government are functioning, filling their roles, and not allowing one part of the government to just run rampant. So again, call us if you have questions, if you have authority issues. That's what we specialize in. 520-485-7371. Check us out online. Our website's guardiantaxlaw.com. We always tell people check us out on Google. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram. Verify who you're working with. Protect yourselves. Make sure that you have good tax professionals, because unfortunately more and more it's not a fair and just tax system, but you do have rights and you need someone to stand up for them and make sure that you are taken care of. So again, have a happy 4th of July and have a great weekend, and we'll get back at this next week.